Hello, everyone, and welcome to the pre-show. I wanted to kick things off a little bit early. Primarily because I'm using a new tool to stream this, and I wanted to make sure it would be associated, for those of you who pay attention to this stuff, I'm using Restream, and Restream recently did their thing where they integrated with Facebook. I used to have to do kind of a weird little workaround for that, but I want to make sure it's working. Let me just try a little. Post a little something. See what we see. Everything seems to be working. Yep, there we go. So for those of you who decide to join me today, welcome to it. We've got so much stuff to cover. I don't know how we could possibly contain the show into 1 hour. And obviously I have to, but the tab of things that we have that we could potentially talk about is huge. It's been an amazingly eventful month since the last time we talked. I hope you all brought a nice big mug of coffee to this month's Coffee and Real Estate. Let's see here. So I'm not getting exactly what I want with the way Restream is doing this. I usually get a great little dashboard, but it isn't. The dashboard part's not working. But that's okay. I think I can live with it. Now, for those of you who are new, this is an opportunity for us to look back over the last month. Now, as I mentioned, we do this every month. We do it on the third Saturday of every month. And at that point, most of the data for the previous month, in this case, May, is settled, right? And there's several pieces of data that take a little longer to get fully churned. And usually it's ready by now. One of those is the number of homes that have had a price reduction. Unfortunately, that number isn't ready yet. It's not going to be ready till next week, according to the Association of Realtors. But we'll do maybe a separate podcast where we cover that information. But we've got all kinds of things going. We have some amazing Supreme Court decisions that absolutely affect real estate. It doesn't affect us directly here, but it does set precedent that will prevent it from happening here. And man, oh man, if you know how things have worked in local real estate in the past years, you know that this is absolutely something that could have come to California. So we'll cover that decision, and that comes to us from the Pacific Legal Foundation. And I actually had an opportunity to have a chat with the lawyer who handled the case, and I look forward to publishing that on my podcast within the next couple of weeks. So that it's a great conversation. It's a great sort of overview, and we discuss the precedent that it sets, and we'll get more into that during the interview. So make sure to check that out. If you're not currently a subscriber to the podcast, it comes out once a week. It doesn't always come out on the same day of the week. I'm actually an active real estate broker right here in Silicon Valley, so sometimes timing just doesn't work. So, but I 9 times out of 10, it happens once a week. This week's was an interview with Brent Bowers, who is a big proponent of investing in vacant land. And I think that's also a great opportunity for folks. So that's something we could talk about too, if anyone is interested. We've also got some interesting discussions about migration out of California. This is a topic I've covered on the podcast a bunch, where we've talked about the last time we saw numbers just for Santa Clara County, just for Silicon Valley. We had crazy numbers in terms of the percentage of population that not only wanted to leave California, but not just leave the Bay Area, but leave California altogether. It was 50%. And that number could have only grown. This number that I'm throwing around here is from about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. So I know and my truth on the ground truth I see with people I talk to who are considering selling their home or considering an exit option, all want to leave the state. And that's a complete reversal. Now, as some of you know, I've been doing this podcast that I mentioned since 2007. I've been in real estate since 1988. And it used to be 20% of folks that I helped figure out what to do with their home here were moving somewhere else in California. They were going to move to, and in many cases, I would help them on both ends of the deal, right? I'd help them sell their home and buy their new home elsewhere, right here in the same county. Not the case today, which means 80%, 20% were leaving, 80% were staying. That was the numbers in the olden days. Since about 2014, 15, 16, right, and that things started to change. We started to see a shift. And now it's the other way around. Only about 20% of the people that I talk to say they plan on staying. 80% say they plan on leaving the state altogether. And we've got some numbers on that are kind of staggering. And also, something else we can chat about is we went from having a budget surplus in California to having a deficit. I believe it's just shy of a $40 billion deficit. So you got to wonder what's changed just since, because that's January. I seem to remember Governor Newsom being very proud of the surplus in January. And today, in the same year, we're talking about a deficit. And to the governor's credit, he has pushed back on just general tax increases. But there are other things in the wind here that are just absolutely idiotic that'll just make things worse. In terms of local numbers, we got some interesting stuff. As I've liked to explain in the past, typically April is one of our peak months. April, May, right? Sometimes you'll see a little equilibrium between those 2 months, but that tends to be the peak. And what's super interesting is so many news outlets are talking about, look how great everything is. Well, this is the greatest it will be for the year. This is it. This is the big time. So if you're not getting great stuff, you have to wonder what's going on, because it's all downhill from here, right? So put on your thinking caps, come up with any questions you might have. Now, of course, we'll bring up topics during today's show that you might want to ask a question about, and I'm totally happy to do that with you. I'm going to take just a minute here to see how we're doing on all the various platforms. We are up on YouTube. Let me just make sure it's working. Yes, it is working. So we're up on YouTube. Let me check Twitch. Twitch is always good for a laugh because there is nobody serious up on Twitch. In fact, I've had thoughts of maybe not streaming on Twitch anymore, but I figure, hey, it's an outlet. I can get to it. We're also up on LinkedIn, checking that LinkedIn is working. And it's apparently not going to go live until the actual time. We are streaming to these other platforms, so I'm assuming it's working and that for some reason... I'm assuming that for some reason, LinkedIn just doesn't want to let you start streaming early, which isn't a problem. I try to, right at the promised time, do what I'm supposed to do. And then we can also look at Twitter. Which is bizarre because it's showing a live stream from 2022. What in the world? Okay, so we are live. Oh my goodness. Let's see, maybe we'll boost this, huh? No, we won't. It's a multiple day thing. All right, so we're up everywhere, which is obviously good. And let's see here. I don't see anything else that's concerning. So if anyone has any questions, I can send responses via the chat to YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. But I believe I'll see your comments from other ones. But so, and obviously the interaction here is more you asking a question and me answering it verbally on the show. So that shouldn't be a problem. But happy to answer any questions you might have. Obviously, as I've mentioned, I'm a real estate broker in Silicon Valley. I'm based out of Morgan Hill, but I'll serve the community going all the way up to, say, Mountain View to the north. Kind of if you draw a horizontal line from there across the county. I started doing real estate up in that area in Palo Alto, Mountain View area way back in 1988. Had some very interesting experiences in the late 80s and early 90s. Including interest rates that boggle most people's minds today. Today we are upset because we're at 7% interest. When I first got into real estate, we were in double-digit interest rates. I think that right when I started, I think we were just shy of 15% interest rates. So I know a time when we were at much higher interest rates. In fact, it's funny to realize there were properties I was tracking in the early 90s when we were still over 10% interest rates. And as soon as interest rates went below 10%, everyone went nuts and started buying houses. The idea was, wow, it'll never get below 10% again. I really need to do something right now. And that was the mindset, right? Of course, obviously home prices were quite a bit lower then, and we've gone way beyond inflation and other measures if we want to talk about how much homes cost. So relative to income, things were much better then than they are now. Now, of course, we're about 8 minutes away from getting started officially with the show. I can see I've got at least one person who's joined me. Welcome to it. This is the Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. We do this once a month on the third Saturday of the month, where we talk about our local real estate numbers and any other news or interesting stuff relating to the world of real estate. And we've got a bunch of that this time around, as I mentioned earlier. What else do I have here? I mean, I have so much stuff. I've got a few little tidbits, and I know I do have a few investor folks who check in with the show. And I realize many of those folks just don't have the time on a Saturday morning to come show up, so they consume the show after the fact, as a replay, which is fine. And on that subject, if you want to go over to Twitter, I've just created, as of, I think, officially, I created it last night, a community on Twitter called the Rebel Underground. And this is a community specifically to have chats about Santa Clara County real estate, topics we've talked about on the podcast, which is called Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker, and also on these monthly Coffee and Real Estate live chats. It's an opportunity to bring those things up and sort of build a community around deepening our understanding of our local markets. And you know, I realize not everybody is a real estate wonk like I am, but I think it's a great place to check in once in a while, get a few answers, and then step away and get on with your life, right? One other thing to mention is I've also started a new tool for homeowners, and I'm not calling it a seller's tool. I'm calling it a homeowner's tool because while it will give you the estimated market value of your home on a once a month basis, it gives you so much more that's useful. Even if you completely ignore what it tells you your home might be worth, all the other tools that come with this thing are amazing. And it's one of the, so far in my research, and I've been doing that every year, I do a deep dive into what are all the cool tools available that I could potentially provide for my clients so that they can be as well informed as possible. And one of the things I've always done with my clients is let them know, there's a series of things you should really check in on at least once a year. Well, this tool satisfies that, but it does it every month. It'll let you analyze your equity in your home right now. Does it make sense to refinance right now? And it literally gives you red text or green text, depending on whether or not you could save yourself some money. And it also will give you thoughts on, it makes sense to refinance if you plan on holding it for the next X number of years, right? So it's got an amazing tool for figuring out if you want to refinance. It's a great tool for figuring out what your equity is and how you can tap that equity. And it doesn't just ballpark it. This is connected to real lending information. In fact, with one click, you can connect with the lender I've partnered with to take it to the next level and actually have them run the numbers specifically and get a down to the penny rundown on what it would cost you to pursue any of the equity tapping options that you might want to do. If you want to theorize about how much money you could make renting your home on VRBO or as a long-term rental, let's say you plan on leaving your home for 6 months and you want to rent it during that time, this has got a great calculator in there that'll not only let you calculate what you might make. Hello, Trayvon. Oh, okay, great. Jeez. Well, we're gonna go ahead and do that. Every once in a while, you do get the idiots out in the wild world. All right. All right. So the first texter is the first to get banned today. So that's always fun. So as I was saying, it's a great tool, and if you want to access it, you can also, what was the other part in terms of tapping? Oh, you can do the rental thing, and that's, the bottom line is check it out for yourself. There's no obligation. You can go in there, you can check it out. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. Head on over to soldbyrobert.com. Top left, just enter your address. It'll give you the value estimate of your home that you may or may not be interested in. But then take a minute to just enjoy it and suck up all that great information. So feel free to check that out. And again, if it's not for you, you can simply just unsubscribe. No harm, no foul. All right, we're about 3 minutes away from starting the show. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop them right into the chat. That's actually a pretty handy tool. That's the first time on this stream I've ever had to ban someone. So what a dubious honor for that idiot. And look, we have another one. So I've been doing real estate since 1988. That was a question from YouTube. How long have I been in real estate? I'm kind of suspecting that this may be the same guy from a minute ago, just based on his screen name, but we're going to go with benefit of the doubt for right now. All right, just 2 minutes away, folks, and then we'll be starting and getting into the meat of the show. First, what we'll do is what we normally do, which is review the numbers for all of Santa Clara County, and we'll compare. And I like to do sort of a top-down thing. We'll start with the county numbers, and then we'll take a look at the county compared to San Jose, which is obviously the next biggest community. San Jose is a very diverse market. And then, of course, we do Morgan Hill, and then we do Gilroy. And so we're sort of doing drilling down to sort of the smaller areas. Let's see here. All right. So I don't like the direction that chat is going, so I'm going to go ahead and delete yet another YouTube person who's commenting, just because it seemed like the thing to do at the time. All right, folks, here we are, 1 minute away. And I'm looking forward to this one. This is one that's also interesting because, as I said before, we are at that point where April and May tend to be the peaks of the season. So it's always good to get an analysis of where that is, because everything should be more or less in terms of how robust the market is downhill from here. So we will get a feeling for where that stands. And then once we've done that, we will get into some of the news items. And of course, I'll take your questions if you have any. And we're just 10 seconds away from the official start. So let's see what we can do here. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate. It's not Real Estate Reality. That's my podcast. It is Coffee and Real Estate with me, Robert Whitelaw, the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in Silicon Valley. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to bring them up in the chat. We've had a couple of interesting chats so far this morning in the pre-show, which of course all ended up with banning someone, which is the first time I've had to do that in the stream. So there you go. But feel free to jump in. I should be able to see your chats. We're doing something a little new this time in terms of how we run things on the stream. And just to make sure, I'd kind of like to verify that LinkedIn is live. And it doesn't appear that it is. So maybe we're not happening on LinkedIn. All right, well, we'll move on. I don't want to waste too much time just focusing on LinkedIn. All right, so feel free to chat up and ask any questions that you might have. We are going to jump in and start with the numbers as we usually do, where we cover Santa Clara County and all that entails, right? We start at the top and we do Santa Clara County. So let's go ahead and jump in and see what we got. All right. First, we're going to start with the usual stuff, which is the total homes on the market. We can see that in Santa Clara County, and it's just to really be clear on what this number represents, it's just the homes that were available in the month of May of 2023 compared to the same month last year. So it gives us a way to be, eliminate any seasonal influences by just doing it. There we go. Same guy again. So we'll just delete him because we can. All right. All right. So in Santa Clara County, we had 1,808 homes on the market last year in May. We had 1,129 this year. That's a 38% decrease from between the two months from year to year. Year to year in San Jose was a 44% decline. We had 486 homes on the market in May of 2023 with 874 in May of 2022. Morgan Hill saw a 28% decline with 59 homes on the market this year in May. Last year, 82. Gilroy saw a 23% decrease, 62 this year, 87 last year. And in terms of, let's see here, I just want to make sure I'm giving you all the rundown here. If we look at sort of a comparison, and I want to do a month-to-month comparison on this because I think it's worth being aware of. Santa Clara County went from 1 month of inventory last month to 1.3 this month. Months of inventory in San Jose went down from 1.1. So 1.1 months last month, 0.9 months this month. 1.2 down in Morgan Hill from 2.8 last month, and Gilroy was 1.6 down from 2.4 last month. So in terms of just the month-over-month trend, we've seen decreases across the board, and that's what we would expect, right? In terms of what we see for real estate performance in these 2 months, it's exactly what we would expect. All right, let's go ahead and take a look now at total home. Let's see. The next number we're going to run on is New listings. Yeah, and well, we're seeing a downtrend as it relates to the inventory numbers, which I think actually makes sense as we sell them off, right? So with the declines in total inventory, I think we're seeing more of a sell-off because remember in past months, if you're, I'm sure we don't all just remember from from memory, all the previous shows, we were tending to see an increase in overall inventory. But when we take a look at overall new listings, we can see that we've also had a dramatic drop there. So pushing forward, I think what we see is an overall drop in the market to where as soon as the sales drop, we're going to start to see more homes being put onto the market that will overcome that number, meaning that we'll start to see increases of inventory again, if that makes sense. So in Santa Clara County, we saw new listings down by 27%. Last year, they were at 1,980. This year at 1,442. San Jose, 30% decrease. 982 last year, 691 this year. Morgan Hill, a 23% decrease, 85 last year, 65 this year. Gilroy, 95 last year, 63 this year. And these are just homes that were listed in that month, right? So far fewer sellers coming onto the market. And when I talk to people, typically the reason why they are not as enthusiastic about going onto the market is interest rates. Let's see here. All right, so new listings is just those homes that were actually added in the month. So these are folks who decided to put their homes on the market. And as I said, interest rates tend to be their biggest concern because if they sell, they have to buy. So frequently the conversation turns into, how do I find a home elsewhere that I can potentially purchase right now without selling my home and then turning their existing home into an investment? That's been a fairly, there's been a definite uptick in the number of conversations I've had relating to that with folks. All right, next, let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at the total number of homes sold. All right. The total number of homes sold compared to the same time last year is down. As you'll see, though, it's up month to month. Santa Clara County saw a 22% decrease, 1,461 last year, 1,143 this year. San Jose, 748 last year, 558 this year for a 25% decrease. Morgan Hill, 64 homes sold last year, and we had 51 homes sold this year for a 20% decrease. And then a 27% decrease in Gilroy, where we had 55 last year and 40 this year. But again, an increase from the same time last month, right? So on a month-to-month basis. And those are numbers we'll see here in a sec. Okay. This is the total months of inventory. Now, I already shared sort of the transition, the change number between last month and this month. Across the board, they've improved, and which makes sense again because this is we are at the peak. But in terms of a year-over-year comparison, we had let's see, in Santa Clara County we had 1 month of inventory this year, 1.2 months. So we had more last year. But also keep in mind, in March of last year is when we saw the dramatic interest rates increase, right? So it makes sense that we would have had more last year at this time because instantly inventory started to accumulate. A bigger number is more balanced than a lower number. Typically the balanced number, the industry standard across the country is 5.5 to 6.5 months, or 5 to 6 months. For us, it's more like 4.5 to 5.5. But we're nowhere near a balanced market, right? If there was a shift over in terms of increasing the number of buyers through either lower interest rates or something else, let's see here. If interest rates were dropped dramatically, we'd instantly be in a case where there would be a ton of folks jumping into the market, and we'd have an instant buyer's market, a seller's market again, where homes would be selling way above asking price. Now, we are seeing homes selling above asking price, which is normal for right now, but this is something that puts us right on the edge between being very much a buyer's market in some areas and a completely a seller's market. All right, so San Jose had less than a month of inventory in May of 2023, 1.2 months of inventory last year. Morgan Hill had 1.2 in May of 2023, 1.3 last year for a 7.7% decrease. And Gilroy stayed at exactly the same as last year, 1.6, which isn't actually a good thing. Because last year, remember, we had this dramatic change in interest rates, so you would expect this year to hopefully be a little better, but we didn't see that change in Gilroy. All right. Now, this is pending. This is a prediction number, right? This tells us what should we expect in terms of the number of sales in the following month. And you'll see how that's sort of an interesting thing to look at on the graph that we're going to have a look at here in a minute. But this is just sort of right now a snapshot of last year's versus this year. So Santa Clara County saw a 9% decrease in the total number of homes that went pending in May. We had 1,199 homes go pending in Santa Clara County overall. Last year at the same time, 1,312. So actually these numbers are much closer to each other than you might expect given the realities of the market in terms of what interest rates are doing. 671 last year in San Jose for a 13% decrease this year at 584. Morgan Hill had a 2% decrease, 56 last year, 55 this year, and I'd call that a wash given the sample size of the data. That's really more or less equal. But the 23% decline in Gilroy with 52 last year and 40 this year, showing we may have some interesting numbers next month in terms of total number of homes sold when compared to the same time last year. So your free housing is going to be even cheaper. Sure. Wow, we got some folks really hot to have some fun here. Let's see here. We're just going to clean house a little bit here. Let's see. All right. There we go. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on from pending and contingent to the next set of data here. And this is the original list price. Now, this is one reason why I like to report this number this way, and it's a little different than most folks do it. This is the original list price. So this is not what the home was listed for at the time that it sold. This is what the seller had their home listed for at the time it was listed. So it's the expectation. It's what sellers thought their home might sell for, right? So this gives us an insight into what the sellers were thinking at the time they listed it. Now, you'll notice all of these, except for Gilroy, are positive numbers, meaning that sellers in all of these areas expected to get more for their home this year than last year by a certain percentage. And what's great is these numbers are much more reasonable than they have been in past months. Let's see here. All right. Okay. So Santa Clara County saw only a 0.4% increase in the same time last year. So this year, the average original list price was $1,883,000. Last year, that number was $1,875,000. So really, I think that is an indicator of how well calibrated folks are now to the realities of the market, because Santa Clara County overall was in many cases seeing double-digit increases where they were expecting 10% more than the same time last year. San Jose, really in the same boat, 0.8%, less than 1%, 1,422,000 in San Jose versus last year's 1,411,000. Morgan Hill, little more out of whack with the comparison at the same time last year. Let's see here. But still much more reasonable than it has been. Morgan Hill is one of those communities that was in some cases expecting 20% more in past months. So this is actually a move in the right direction. And Gilroy, once again, is absolutely calibrated to what the market is really presenting, right? Let's see here. 13.5% down from the same time last year. With 1,153,000 being the original list price, down from last year's 1,333,000. So really, they are the most calibrated and have been the most calibrated now for quite a few months. Let me just, let's see. Just do a little more house cleaning here. Yeah, all right. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next set of numbers here. Now, this will be average sales price. So we'll get to see what the delta is between sales price and actual expectations. So the average sales price in Santa Clara County overall was down 3.3%. 1,818,000 was the average sales price in Santa Clara County, down from 1,879,000 last year. San Jose was down 9%. And remember, I think a lot of these numbers are interesting because the delta between what the expectations were on the part of the sellers and what they ended up getting from buyers is smaller. And in past months, this number was much greater in terms of the difference between what folks were expecting and what they were getting. In San Jose, it was down 9%. They got 1,392,000 on average versus 1,529,000. Morgan Hill saw a 14.3% drop in average sales price, currently at 1,284,000. Last year in this month, it was 1,497,000. And then Gilroy saw a 1.9% increase. And I think we can attribute that to them having for months now been far more calibrated to what the market will bear for home prices. Their number is at 1,235,000, up from 1,212,000 from the same time last year. And I still think Gilroy is a great place to find yourself some amazing deals. And given the current market situation in Gilroy, if you're looking to get yourself a home without, receiving some crazy stuff that we see, say, in Morgan Hill and San Jose and other parts of Santa Clara County, I think it's a great option for you. Now, one thing that I wanted to also share is how much money does that represent, right? If we talk about a difference between average sales price versus the original list price, what does that actually equal, right? So between expectations and reality in Santa Clara County of what homes were listed for originally versus what they sold for, they ended up getting $65,000 less. In San Jose, they got $30,000 less. In Morgan Hill, they got $356,000 less. And in Gilroy, they got $82,000 more than expectations on average. So that's kind of impressive. Particularly the Morgan Hill number, where we start to see the expectations really need to be adjusted more in terms of what's getting listed and where the price points are. All right. Next, we are looking at percent of list price. Now, this tells us how much over or under asking price is. If the number is at 100%, that means that they are getting 100% of their list price at the time the home sold. So just like we were trying to look into the mindset of sellers a moment ago with the original list price, this gives us a little bit of a look into the minds of buyers. When buyers were faced with a specific price, how much do they end up offering? And then this is relative to that, right? So In Santa Clara County overall, we have 104.6%, meaning that in May of 2023, on average in Santa Clara County, homes were selling for 4.6% over asking price. Last year, that number was 111.5, so about 11.5% over asking price. So definitely a delta. It's a 6.9% drop from the same time last year. San Jose saw an overall change of 7.2%, where we got 104.6, so the same county number, versus last year's 111.8, so 11.8% over asking price in that case. Morgan Hill is getting 101.1%, or excuse me, 100.1%, so 0.1% over asking price. Last year it was 106.1, so 6.1% over. That's an overall 6% delta between those two times. And Gilroy saw 102.4 versus 106.3 for a 3.9% delta between those two. And I think those are both interesting numbers. So first of all, this should be the highest we see this number this year, right? We could have made an argument we would have seen it drop more in May. And we'll see we'll see what sort of drops we had in the over time graph that we're going to look at in a minute. But it's interesting. Look at what has happened in Gilroy, where they are beating Morgan Hill on average and how much above list price their homes are selling for. I think that's interesting. And I think it's because of the smart pricing they've been doing. And I think because of so many buyers adjusting their prices downward, or having to adjust their price downward because of interest rates, I think that instead of wanting to change the kind of house they want to get in San Jose, they've said, okay, well, I can get the house I want at this lower price if I go to Gilroy. And I've seen folks, even in my own searches, right? So I have an awful lot of folks who have active searches running right now. And for them, I've seen them add, at first it was to add Morgan Hill, right? If they were looking just in San Jose, Campbell, that area, suddenly they're also looking in Gilroy and in Morgan Hill and sort of more of the South Bay area, because they want to be able to get the same size home. They still want that 4-bedroom home or that 3-bedroom with a certain amount of square footage, whatever it might be. They've just shifted the location instead of shifting the type of home they're looking for at their price range. Okay. Next, let's look at the total number of days on market. Now, this has gone up from the same time last year by 73% in the county. It was 11 days last year at this time, 19 days this year in May of 2023. San Jose was up 64%, 11 days last year, 18 days this year. Morgan Hill up 117%, 12 days last year, 26 days this year. And again, it's taking longer to sell in Morgan Hill, I think because of how sellers are still reticent to hold on to those list prices and not come onto the market well, and then not drop their prices soon enough to take advantage of the market that we have. 156% increase in Gilroy from 9 days to 23 days. The magic number for me is really 30 days. Once you've seen a home on the market for 30 days, I think what you tend to see let's see, is once they've been on the market for 30 days, it's a psychological thing for sellers. They start to start wondering why their home hasn't sold yet, right? So we're now not in that point anymore where it's taking that long to get home sold. But if your home's been on the market for 30 days, clearly this is something you're going to want to address. It shouldn't be taking you this long to get your home sold. And if you haven't gotten sold yet, you need to start looking at your strategy and figure out if a price change is appropriate for you. Okay. And we're going to do a little more cleanup out here. We've got a little bit more stupid stuff. Let's see here. Sorry to make you wait here, Josh, but I just want to sweep away the trash, I guess you could say. All right. I feel like we're there. All right. All right. So here, where are we at? So here we go. So this is a chart to look back over the past months. And we get to look at total active listings first, and we'll get to see what kind of a trend we're seeing here. Now, obviously it's up. Let's see here. More trash to take out. And we see an increase, right? So month to month, we see an increase. We've actually been seeing increases since February of 2023. And to see, for instance, when we start to see decreases in this, that's something to really point out, because we're starting to sell off more. And this is obviously lower than it was last year, but it's increasing as we go into this month. And this is very normal. If we look at past months, check out from, say, January, February, March, look at the dramatic increases. And now this is obviously when the market was still pretty robust. March is when we had the hit of interest rates, but then look at the total increase in active listings as things accumulated on the market. It's normal in this season to see this curve, right? From January, February, March, April. And notice how it peaks here in April, and then drops a little bit in May when the market's a little bit more robust. But this is kind of what we expect to see, right? Next, if we look at new listings, we can see we've had an uptick. And again, at this time of year, this uptick is very normal. It's been a pretty interesting uptick between April and May. If we look at April and May of last year, we can see we actually had a decrease. That's not super characteristic, but it's also a result really of what happened in March. We saw that drop off after March simply because of interest rates, right? It was just fewer folks wanting to go on the market. And then April, May of last year, of 2021, we saw a decrease in new listings, which is also not fairly typical. We saw a boost in April, but then a bit of a drop in May. But again, as I've said before, April and May tend to switch spots sometimes in terms of which one is the peak. But that year, that was the peak. If we look at the total number of homes sold, dramatic increase between April and May. Now, we did have in May, or excuse me, late April, early May, we did have some interest rate boosts. But notice how the total active listings actually met the total number of homes sold. So we sold off an awful lot of inventory, which I think explains why we had an inventory drop. Excuse me. Not from the year to year, but explains why we didn't have as much inventory growth as we've had in the past. Total new listings also jumped. Again, pretty characteristics. I would have expected this to be more in April, but we saw it happen in May. And that may have been also encouraged by the lower interest rates, as sellers thought, well, maybe there's going to be more buyers for me to take advantage of here. All right. Next, we look at the total number of pendings, and we can see we've got a pending increase. If we compare that to April and May of last year, there was a drop between April and May, and that is again not super characteristic, but also because of the interest rates. But if we look at April, May, we can see it was relatively flat with a little bit of an increase. And again, here's sort of your plateau in terms of total number of pending homes, in terms of it predicting the following month. Now, because of this increase in the total number of pending homes, the guess is we're going to see a similar curve on sold homes for June. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see that June number increase. All right, again, let's just do a little trash review here. Let's see here. I think I already did this one. Okay, let's see here. Sorry for the silence here, just doing the mandatory throw out here. And there we go. I think I got them all. All right. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the next thing here. That should cover it for this slide. Next, let's go ahead and talk about average original list price versus average sales price. And you can see, as we were talking about in the previous slide, these two have sort of merged. We've seen that average list price drop as properties come onto the market, I think, at a more reasonable price range. And we've seen the average sales price sort of rise to meet it. Now, if we try to pull out of this sort of the April, May, and then into June trend, you can see that last year, average sales price dropped between May and June. Between May and June of last year, it increased, in 2021. So remember, much different market, super low interest rates, much more robust market. But in terms of what can we expect for next month, I'm going to expect either flat or a little bit of a decline, I think, in terms of average sales price for June. But again, we're still at numbers in May that are above asking price in terms of sales, and we're seeing an uptick in sales for this month as well if we can rely on those pending numbers. So it's tough. It's a tough one to call, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see that happening next month. Now, if we take a look at the total history on percent of asking price, we can see that we were hitting another peak. We're at 104.2 last month, 104.6 this month for the overall county. We were down at 99%, so below asking price in January of 2023. If we look back on previous April, Mays, we can see that April and May saw a decrease in that. And again, this would be a substantially decreasing number after March because of the influences of the interest rate hike. But we saw things bottom out and sort of be below 100% in August of 2022. It wouldn't surprise me. I think we'll see the same trend. If we look at March, April, May, we can see that even when the market was super robust, once we got to April and May, this number tended to drop or go flat, and we see it drop all the way up into September, and then it started to ramp back up in October. My guess is, given what we've seen in the past, given the current market realities, this number is going to drop. It'll either start dropping next month or the month after that, but it will start to drop again. Days on market, big drop from just our peak that we hit in January of 2023. And if you look back to March of 2022, we can see that we still had a little bit of a drop in days on market. The reason for that is because of homes that sold in March where they had their rate locked in during that time period. So these homes still continue to sell, but then a really rapid increase all the way up until January, with then a really dramatic drop despite interest rates and the total number of days on market. And a lot of that, I think we've had it be very flat between April and May. And I think a lot of that is fed by coming onto the market at a more reasonable price, so homes aren't staying on the market as long as they did previously. All right. Now, this is the percentage of homes with reduced prices, and unfortunately, we don't have those numbers yet. So I thought I'd just share with you what they were last month. Santa Clara County last month had 17.4% of homes drop their list price by some amount. San Jose had 17%. Morgan Hill had 10.3, 29.7 for Gilroy. No idea what they're going to be this month. It wouldn't surprise me if these still are pretty low. In some of the more challenging markets, maybe in Morgan Hill, maybe a higher number, just because in order to take advantage of what most people see as the selling season, you would expect folks to want to drop those prices. And I think that that's a very reasonable expectation for next month. Okay. All right. Okay, so that takes care of the chat about numbers. Now, if anybody has any questions, we've had some interesting, well, I guess you could call them interesting, some interesting chats in the chat so far. Lots and lots of folks I got to ban, which is always fun. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm happy to answer them now if you've got any. Otherwise, we can get into sort of the news that I think affects us in real estate. Of course, the goal here is to give you guys as many good answers as possible, or at least some good sources of information, so that you can be as informed as possible about what's going on and how it might affect you. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is a national thing, and one reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I actually have an interview with this lawyer who is currently hugging this lady. And the reason she is because of equity theft. Now, just to give you an idea of what equity theft is, now this is a case that went before the Supreme Court. And let's say that you owe the state $5,000 and they foreclose on your home. They seize your home and then they sell it at auction and they sell it for $100,000. Well, then they give you nothing. They pay your debt and they keep that money. This is not a one-off. This is something that happens all over the country. This was specifically in Nebraska, and it's one of those cases that it blows my mind that this had to go to the Supreme Court. But in a rare 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court decided that this lady gets her money, that just because I owe you $5,000 doesn't mean you get to take my house and keep all of the equity that I've accumulated in that house over the years. So this is a great win. It's amazing that it was 100% of all the court justices decided that this was a thing. I actually just did an interview with this lawyer, and it's going to be up on the podcast. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. You can find it at soldbyrobert.com. The home page for the podcast is therebelbroker.com. It's also on YouTube as a video, so feel free to check it out there if you like. But I wanted to make sure and mention that because this here in Morgan Hill, we've seen similar stupid stuff, right? So a lot of you will know that in 2002, was it 2003? The Supreme Court made a decision that cities, counties, local governments can use eminent domain to seize your property just because it represents an economic benefit to that city or county, which blows my mind. And Morgan Hill tried to use eminent domain to seize a strip mall here on Dunn and Monterey because they thought it wasn't pretty enough. And they wanted to give it to a private developer. And the reason that was going to make it okay was because it would represent more tax money coming into the city. So it took a ton of folks going and yelling and screaming at City Hall, and I'm proud to say I was one of them, to make sure that that didn't happen. So this is hopefully these kinds of decisions are going to be something we see more of, where it becomes much harder to use eminent domain to seize someone's property. And in a situation like this, which is so clearly theft of your stuff, it kind of amazes me. So that's one I wanted to share with everyone. Next, I always like to hit what Realtor.com is saying about what the latest is. Sort of the rundown of the numbers here are, let's see, median listing price dropped by 0.9% over last year. Now, remember, these are national numbers. So this is us sort of thinking, when we've just looked at our local numbers for the county, what are the numbers that we see comparing that to overall for the whole country? And if we see that, we see median listing price has dropped. I don't know why they use median listing price. I think average price is a lot. Average and median together actually give you the fullest picture. But on average, our average list price dropped by, let's see here, by a bit more than that, right? So it down in many areas by like 6%. We had a little bit of an increase in original list price, obviously, in Santa Clara County and San Jose, but a 0.9% drop over the same time last year nationally. New listings down by 22% in our area. New listings were down 27.2%, so we're a little higher than what the national average is. Active inventory growth slowed just 10%. We actually saw a decrease. So in terms of growth of inventory, we went the opposite direction by they went up 10%, we went down 37%. And homes spent 13 extra days on the market. If we look at that compared to the same time last year, we have not 13. We're spending 8 more days on the market than the same time last year. So just to sort of compare us to the nation, that's sort of the rundown that I wanted to share with everybody. Now, one thing I wanted to hit is the loss of population in Santa Clara County. This is kind of a big deal, and I've got some charts I want to share with you to kind of demonstrate how amazing this is. Probably some of you may remember that Governor Newsom was very excited about the surplus in money that California had in January. There were plenty of conversations around this. And now, as of today, we have a deficit of, I believe, 40 billion, 39 billion, something in that neighborhood. And a ton of this is having to do with migration and people leaving the state. California's population is declining. The population fell 1.2% between 2020 and 2022. If you look at even earlier, if you go back to 2018, that number is even bigger, to just over 39 million people. The exodus was part of a trend, a decline in births, an increase in deaths. Migration is really the number one thing. But folks are leaving, and they're leaving in huge numbers. Where are Californians going? In terms of my anecdotal experience, the top states of folks I talk to is Idaho, Texas, and Florida. This sort of bears that out. Texas clearly has the highest number. What's interesting is in terms of Texas is number one or number two on the list for folks I talk to, but Idaho is really amazingly high, much higher than Florida. So I'm not sure what the dynamic there is. It's even in specific areas. Most of the folks are moving to Coeur d'Alene, which is in northern Idaho. But let me share with you some numbers that are kind of amazing. One, this is since 2017. This is the California's aggregate net outflow from all classes of adjusted gross income. And why do I say AGI, adjusted gross income? Because that's from your tax report. This is from the IRS. So that bottom number that you're getting all taxed on is the adjusted gross income. And this is what we lost in California, because this is tax data from 2017 to 2020. And you can see how many billions we lost in 2017. And it's a cumulative thing, right? So this is how much loss we've accumulated over these years. As of 2023, we don't have the numbers for 2022. So as of the end of 2021, we have had a grand total of $425 billion lost, not including 2022, in terms of money that's taxable for the state. So this is a huge deal, right? This is specifically reflected in people are filing their taxes in another state, and the IRS obviously can tell when that happens, and this is the result. And you can see that the amount has grown just about every year in terms of the amount that goes away. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. The percentage of California's lost adjusted gross income from people with annual incomes of greater than $200,000 or more. In 2018, the number of people who were leaving who had over $200,000 in annual income was 32.4% of the number of people who left. In 2019, that number jumped to 44%. In 2020, that number jumped to 58.6%. And as of 2021, 69%, 68.9% of the folks who leave make over $200,000. Do we believe that that number dropped in 2022? I do not. Not if my anecdotal guy on the street talking to people who are leaving numbers are any indicator. Let's see here. Just going to do a quick check again here. Okay. Looks like we're all right over there in the chat. So this number is likely to get worse. Both of these numbers are likely to get worse. Once we have those 2022 numbers, I believe this will be bigger. And we can talk a little bit about the reasons. So these are all the companies that have left California from 2020 to 2023. So it doesn't, and this is a topic I've talked about on the podcast a bunch. You know, each year I usually do one show and talk about the various companies that have left California over the last year. And I've been able to do that since 2015, 2016. So this is just from 2020 to 2023. And what's kind of shocking is the number of these companies that are high-tech companies that have left the Bay Area, right? And everyone thinks of which is my market, right? The Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County. These are areas that people think of as, well, you have to be here to get the business done. Or clearly some of these people who are founders of what made Silicon Valley do not believe that anymore. You know, Kelly Moore Paints, Landsea Homes, there's an awful lot of companies that you may not be familiar with. McAfee was a San Jose-based company that moved to Texas. Let's see, there's lots of little tech companies, but we also get down here to some of the big names that just about everybody knows. Tesla moved to Texas in October of 2021. HomeLight is actually in Arizona. That's a company I've actually done business with in the past. Kaiser Aluminum. Let's see here. Where's some of those ones that really kind of blew me away? I hadn't realized some of these had left. Align Technology. Oracle. That's a huge one. Oracle is literally one of the founding fathers of Silicon Valley, and they're out. They left in December of 2020. Hewlett Packard Enterprises, again, one of the founders of what is Silicon Valley. Let's see, what else? Everybody, look, I mean, just the list goes on and on and on. Norton, antivirus, just tons of different companies that have left. And think about that. That doesn't just represent what income the company generates. It represents the jobs that left with it, right? So that's just nuts. Next, California's budget deficit may be even larger than predicted. Last year, California state budget assumed a $97.5 billion surplus, but the state now faces a deficit. 8 months ago, energized by projections of a $100 billion surplus, Gavin Newsom and the legislature wrote a $307 billion budget that lavished money on new and expanded services. Last month, Newsom had to eat those words. Surplus had suddenly morphed into what he said was a $22.5 billion deficit, and I think the newest number is not 22 but 39. And they proposed a $29.7 billion budget. Advocates for programs and services that wouldn't receive the extra spending the previous budget had promised began complaining. Of course they did. Let's see. Where was it? I had gone through and highlighted some of the key stuff. I'm kind of surprised that went away. Let's see. How Newsom solves the California budget that went from a $97.5 billion surplus to a $31.5 billion deficit. So yes, this number is a little bit higher. What's the date on this one? May 12th, 2023. So one thing he deserves some credit for is he has been resisting just general tax rate increases, but there's some stuff in the wind here that's a little bit nuts. Let's see here. Newsom said there's mainly because of lower tax revenue from wealthy California taxpayers whose income fluctuates greatly with market conditions, coupled with high inflation and more restrictive monetary policy by the Federal Reserve, which is totally and completely wrong. I don't think anyone who's been asked why they're leaving the state of California has talked about any of this. They've talked about burdensome, companies talk about burdensome regulations. People talk about taxes and policies that are being discussed in Sacramento that are expensive and stupid. Let's see. Trigger cuts. Yeah, we could get into that, but I think that's kind of a time hole here. Let's see. California wealth and exit tax. So this is the response, right? So in the book titled How to Make Sure You Lose Even More People Than You're Already Losing, these are the top steps to take. Because in addition to now having a scenario where we are losing people, instead of trying to think of how do we keep people here, instead of thinking attract them, well, let's threaten them. California wealth tax and exit tax is in the wind. I don't think an exit tax would fly. I think that would get challenged in the courts, and I think maybe through intrastate commerce law or whatever else, they wouldn't be able to do this. But regardless, it sounds like they're trying to aim this at really just the top earner businesses. There's not a lot of individuals, it looks like, that would get hit by this. Let's see here. Allows wealth tax to be applied for several years. See, and this is the other part. It's not just a one-time thing. Several years after the taxpayer leaves California also included are provisions that enable certain taxpayers to defer payment by contracting to pay the tax in the future, even if they leave. California unlikely to pass, thank goodness. Thanks in part to Governor Newsom's opposition, so that's great. I'm glad to hear he's opposing this because it's absolutely ridiculous and absolutely stupid. The next one, exit tax explained. I'll include a link to this in the description of the video for folks. But these are the kinds of crazy things that get proposed. I mean, one of the things from last year that we did a show on the podcast was everybody wanted to do free healthcare for everyone in California, regardless of citizenship status, which would have required a near doubling of the taxes paid in California. We're already, I think, the #1 state in terms of taxes. And then IRS, 332,000 taxpayers left California in 1 year. There's actually a documentary from these folks, and actually the two charts I shared with you earlier, these guys are from an intro video to that, so you can check that out if you like. Let's see. California tax base shrank nearly to 29.1 billion as it saw a net loss of 332,000 taxpayers and their dependents, according to the IRS migration data. And again, this isn't one of those things where you can say, well, that's just somebody tweaking the numbers. That's straight up IRS numbers, so there's really no way to claim that that's not what's happening. Among the tech companies that moved out of the state in 2021 are Uber, Airbnb, Oracle, Yelp, and Tesla. And we already kind of discussed some of those. I didn't mention Uber or Airbnb, I think. The Hoover Institution, a public policy think tank at Stanford University, also found that in the first half of 2021, more than 70 companies headquartered in California left the state due in large part to the onerous property tax and labor laws. The majority of those companies relocated to Texas, Tennessee, and Arizona. So Tennessee is interesting. I don't think I've talked to anyone locally who's left who's been on their way to Tennessee, but clearly some of these businesses, that's where they want to go. I've actually heard good things about Tennessee in terms of the amount of growth that they're having. California's income tax rate of 13.3% is the highest in the nation. On top of that, the tax rate for businesses is 8.84%. The census data also showed the state's population, which includes migration in and out as well as deaths and births, was down more than 500,000 people between 2020 and 2021. And that's just 2020 to 2021. That doesn't take into account the fact that this has been going on for at least the last 5 or 6 years. The two states that experienced the largest population growth were Texas and Florida, which added around 884,000 and 707,000 people, respectively. Let's see. Was there anything else on that one that I highlighted? I don't think so. Nope, that's it. Okay. So this is a site that I kind of wanted to turn everyone onto in case you don't support the mileage tax. The mileage tax. So the second chapter, the first chapter in that book about how to make sure everyone leaves your state is create a exit tax. The second thing is create a mileage tax. And this is a deal where you would pay 5 cents per mile that you drive. And that's the equivalent of an 80-cent per gallon gas hike. It's absolutely ridiculous. They're trying to hit people with more and more through more kind of scumbag methods. But California's politicians have already imposed the highest gas tax and car tax in the nation on drivers. Now they want to impose a new mileage tax to charge us per mile we drive to get more of our money. Now, an interesting thing to say here would be, okay, well then does that mean that the commuter lane goes away and the Caltrans pay lanes go away, right? For those of you who aren't familiar, in our Bay Area, we have these lanes where you can put a little box on your windshield, inside your windshield, that senses it, and you can get access to the commuter lane or to an exclusive lane for commuting during commuter hours, and you can pay for it. It charges you based on that usage. I'm guessing that's not going to go away, so you'd still have to pay your 0.5 cent per mile plus whatever it charges you'd have to pay for accessing that particular lane, which is just ridiculous. So you can go to reformcalifornia.org for this one and sign the petition. I would strongly suggest you do it. But the bottom line is, we've already paid for the creation of the roads. We've paid for all of this stuff through our tax dollars, through the crazy tax on our gas and on our cars. The fact that they now want to charge us, after they've taxed us for all of that, for using the things, driving on the roads and using the cars that they've already taxed us for, is just amazing. Now, I'm someone who was born and raised in California, and I have a business that's very anchored, right? So as a real estate broker, my license is only good in California. So if I want to relocate, I have to get a new license in another state. Given all of this, I'm actually at a point where I'm seriously considering doing that. I've actually got paperwork for other states to get a broker's license there because, frankly, it makes more sense for me to pull up stakes and go to another community in another state than to continue to put up with some of this stuff. All right, next. This is one I thought was interesting, also from the Pacific Legal Foundation. The question was, somebody complained with this most recent decision, is the Supreme Court putting a thumb on the scale for property owners? And my answer would be, I sure hope so. If nothing else, the defense of property rights is sort of right there at the soft, chewy center of what should be the cornerstone of what we tend to believe. And they make the same point. Shouldn't there be a thumb on the scale of property owners in a court of law? And this is from, what's amazing is this statement is from one of the judges. In her concurring opinion in Sackett versus EPA, Justice Elena Kagan, probably the sharpest rhetorician on the bench, especially when she's disagreeing with her colleagues, complained the court's majority was putting a thumb on the scale of property owners. And it blows my mind that a Supreme Court judge would say something like that. If anybody deserves a thumb on the scales, it's private property owners. Because how do you fight all these crazy organizations that are trying to control your property, whether it's the California Coastal Commission or the EPA or the county that wants to do eminent domain because they're not making enough tax dollars off of you because you bought your home 30 years ago, or it's, you know, the other county that wants to seize your property so they can keep the profit from it. Yeah, please, more thumbs. Put all 18 of your thumbs from the Supreme Court justices on that scale, because if anybody needs it, it's those of us who own property and are trying to defend our rights to do what we want with it. All right, next. Federal Reserve holds policy rate steady for the first time in 15 months. I wanted to bring this one up because it's definitely a shift in policy. Last year, the Federal Reserve said all through 2023, we are going to be doing increases, right? And they stopped. Some folks are talking about a need for a decrease, and the same math still applies today that has applied all along, right? To reduce inflation, you have to raise interest rates. To reduce recession, you have to reduce interest rates, right? So we're caught in this place where we're in inflationary times, but we're also heading into a recession. So at what time do you make that switch? At what time do you say inflation is enough under control that we can now start addressing recession? Because when you start addressing recession, you'll drop your interest rates. Now, on this subject, that's one reason why I still suggest to my buyers, go ahead and get your fixed rate mortgage today and just keep an eye on interest rates and use the tool that I mentioned during the pre-show hour. I've got a tool that will give you every month an update on whether or not it makes sense for you to refinance your home. Head on over to soldbyrobert.com, top left, enter the address to get your free home value estimate. And as part of that, you will get a monthly update that includes that information along with a ton of other tools. So as soon as the opportunity comes, because interest rates will get lowered, right? Now, of course, interest rates are not directly affected by what the Fed does. They're more associated with 10-year treasuries. But the psychology behind so much of this changes when they reduce their rates. So the response is likely going to be a reduction in interest rates. Are we going to get back down to 2.5% interest rates? I doubt it, but it wouldn't surprise me if we get back down to sub 5, maybe 4.5, 4.7, possibly. So just do that, lock in your rate so that it doesn't increase anymore. You don't want to have a variable rate and then have it go up. That would stink, depending on how long the lock period is. But if you've got like a 2-year lock period, maybe that's a thing to do with a adjustable rate mortgage. If you believe that we've got a 2-year timeline where you're going to have more beneficial interest rates. But if that doesn't happen, you don't want that then to switch to a variable rate where your price is going to go up. The amount you're paying per month is going to go up. All right. Now, wow, I imagine I really rushed through an awful lot of that stuff. These are the most articles I think I've ever gone through in one show. So I thought I'd go and hit what we're seeing in interest rates. I like to do this as we wrap up with sort of finishing information here. Now, the 30-year fixed rate is at 6.95. We saw the lowest at 5.5 over the last 52 weeks. We saw a peak at 7.37, so we're still way up there, hovering right near the top. The 5/1 adjustable rate is at 6.9. It makes no sense to get an adjustable rate mortgage when there's only a 0.05% difference between the two. Don't do it. The potential for the fixed rate will have you prepared for anything that comes. The adjustable rate will not, right? 30-year FHA is at 6.63. 15-year fixed is at 6.3. 30-year jumbo is at 6.69. 30-year VA is at 6.62. So I guess better than before, not much better. These are still very high. And you can see here's the trend. If we look at, let's see here. I would really rather get a shorter timeline here on this particular chart, but doesn't give me that option. Now, another thing I wanted to hit before we say goodbye this morning, in case you're thinking about investing, one great way to do that is to understand where the most challenged markets are. And these are the top 10 zips with the greatest number of REOs in May of 2023. And San Antonio surprises me. San Antonio has been a fairly robust market, but there's an awful lot of stuff going on there that indicates the market's facing a challenge. With this many REOs in the mix, I'm guessing you're going to see other opportunities for potential investment if you're interested in investing in San Antonio. Now, I've been to San Antonio a few times. I don't want to live there. It's way too freaking hot and way too freaking humid for me. But that doesn't mean it's a bad investment. There's plenty of people who do live there, and it may be worth your time. Augusta, Georgia is the second on this list. You'll notice there's nothing from California on this list. Augusta, Georgia may be a thing. I can't remember the last time I was in Augusta. It's got to be, I'm not even sure I ever have been to Augusta. But again, consider this a signal flag of, hey, you may want to check this out and see if it makes sense for you to consider investing here. So many of these communities are going to have very low barriers to entry in terms of price. If you're someone who is right here in Santa Clara County with me, you've maybe been bummed that if you wanted to get into an investment property, they're $1 million, they're $900,000. Something to keep in mind is if you're willing to go into the valley, if you're willing to go into the Central Valley, go over the mountains to the east, you can definitely find investment properties that will do a good job for you. In fact, last year I helped quite a few folks do house hacking, buyers who were just really hating what they were seeing in terms of what it would cost them to buy a home here, ended up buying a duplex in the Central Valley and are doing very well. And their mortgage payment, the amount they pay each month on the home, is either very close to zero or they're actually making money by renting the other half of their duplex. So these are options that you can explore here if that's something that you're up for. And if you're not, let's say you do live here, but you want to invest, prices are much more reasonable over there. You could continue to live here, stay here, do your thing, and then have an investment property over there that's still close enough to keep things comfortable in case for some reason you feel like you need to go over there. But the other alternative is to be completely hands-off and have a property management firm take care of it for you. But I think duplexes are the best beginner investment for folks who want to start building that real estate empire. Next, these are U.S. foreclosure activity sees spike in May of 2023. I wanted to share this one because there's a spike in California happening. And because, again, we're at the peak of the market, we can expect the market to get more challenging as we move on. So I would expect foreclosures like this in California to grow as we move further into 2023, not to shrink. So lenders started the foreclosure process in 23,245 U.S. properties in May of 2023, up 4% from last month and up 5% from a year ago. California saw 2,451 foreclosure starts. So that's the very beginning. That's the notice goes out to let you know that you are behind in your payment. Los Angeles, California had 700 foreclosure starts. So Southern California, I think, is an interesting market. Fairly diverse, but there is an awful lot going on in Los Angeles. I've talked to some folks who even live in areas that are less impacted by some of the craziness that's going on with the homeless situation. And I was just reading an article this morning about how police don't even respond to homeless folks causing an issue in the streets anymore. They just never show up. And this ranges from just homeless laying in front of a business or in front of the door of a business to actually, mentally altered homeless folks confronting people walking on the street, which is sad. Foreclosures completion numbers increases 38% from last month. Lenders repossessed 4,020 U.S. properties through completed foreclosure. So that means the people are no longer in the house. The foreclosure's done. The bank has taken it back in May of 2023. That's up 33% from last month and up 41% from last year. So that's a pretty big change, particularly when we compare it to last year. There was an awful lot of you don't get to foreclose stuff happening over the last couple of years relating to COVID. That stuff is going away. And I think a lot of that's being reflected in these numbers. All right. Wow. So right on the money, just 3 minutes after 11, and we've covered all the articles that I had posted here to review with all of you. If anybody has any questions, feel free to share them in the chat. We've had a very lively chat in YouTube. Unfortunately, it was sort of idiot chat from people who just wanted to come in and do what they do in terms of being disruptive and racist and all that other kind of wonderful stuff that sometimes the internet is going to bring to the table. But that's fine. We got rid of them and reported them, and hopefully they'll just create more accounts and then do it again to somebody else, or maybe me next time. So maybe I'll get to digitally shake hands with these folks again next month. But anyway, I'll be happy to help get those folks banned. All right. So if you have any other questions or concerns, if you're watching this as a replay, please feel free to reach out to me at soldbyrobert.com. All my contact information is there. If you'd like to start your search, I've got a great tool there for you. I also have some other tools that are kind of amazing that aren't right in your face there at the front of my webpage that I think you might find interesting. I've got another one. I've got a HomeBot AI tool that's kind of amazing that is the home owner information, dashboard information that I'm sharing with folks that I've already talked about. There's also a buyer side to that really has, maybe we look at that. Do we want to look at that just real quick? I don't want to turn this into like a yay me thing, but let's see here. You know what? Let's just look at my face while I do this for a second. Apologies. I know I'm not the prettiest fella in town. But I'd like to show it to you real quick, just because I think if you're searching, it's definitely interesting. And I can pull that up here in a second. And I want to show you the screen. So if you want to do a search, let's go ahead now and go back to that. All right, so let's say you want to search, and you want to search for a home, and let's say you want to do San Jose. So immediately this pops up, but let's see here. There's other cool tools here. You can add a home for your home, and it will give you comparison stuff. Like, are you getting this? Are you gaining or losing compared to the house you're currently in? Let's see if it gives me, I don't remember if I've created one. Does it give me a login? I think I've already created an account with this. But in any event, you can sort of zoom in on these and just get a look. You can do filters. You can say 3 beds, 2 baths, house, available, available, apply. But once you get into it, let me go see if I can... let me see if I can get that for you, because there's actually another dimension to this that is really kind of amazing. Let's see here. All right, here we go. This is the sexy part. So I want you to look at this, and we can just call it purchase my, because it takes into account what you want to do, which I think is cool. And you can do it by and this is what it does. It keeps track of stuff like, how could you move the fastest? And we'll just skip this for now. What's your ideal price point? You can shift this number, right, to whatever you want. There's a cute little video from me, because who doesn't want a cute little video from me? So here we are in San Jose. Now, what makes this interesting? We can look at what are the most popular markets, right? Where it's a seller's market, where it's a buyer's market. You can see that the blue is a buyer's market, orange, and it gives you this wide view of, okay, how hot are these markets? It's obviously going to be harder to buy here because things are really moving. It's going to be a little easier here because it's happening a little bit less. It's going to be a lot easier here because these numbers are lower, right? So you can get a feeling for what's happening in those marketplaces, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. So let's say you want to live in a community with, on average, has bigger homes. This gives you the average square footage for the homes that are for sale. Here's 1,300 square feet is the average. 1,600 square feet is the average. 2,054 square feet in Morgan Hill. So just do it by size, or you can do cheaper buys. Now, if you've already got your home entered of what your home is, you can do this comparison, and this would give you a graphical indication of whether or not on average it's more or less. So these are all the average prices. You can make certain areas your favorites. Let's see here. Let's say you want to make this one a favorite. You can add that to your favorites. Boom, and it's in your favorites. You can go back. You can take a look at what the average has been over time. There is just so much more at your fingertips info here than, excuse me, than you get with other tools. Excuse me. And then finally, how fast. So this gives you an idea of the time between when you start the process and when you can move in. In some areas, it takes longer than others, right? 112 days here, 103, 85, 67, 76. So just a really cool tool to elbow your way through tons and tons of data and do it very easily. So feel free to check that out. You actually can't access it directly. You need to contact me directly to get access to this particular tool. So feel free to reach out to me. Go to soldbyrobert.com, send me an email. I'll be happy to set you up with this tool. I'm working on the best way to try to roll this out to folks. I've only had access to this now for a couple of months, and I've been test marketing it with a subset of folks who've just loved it. So anyway, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to get you set up with this if you're interested in shopping. And this is a great tool for investors as well. So you'll get all the conventional things that you get, with the one exception being it doesn't mail you daily updates. So I have a different search tool for that. The search tool that's at the front page of Sold by Robert is going to give you that regular update as soon as listings that meet your criteria come up. But if you just want to do a little market research as you're doing your search, this tool is kind of freaking amazing. All right. That is about it, folks. I hope you have enjoyed this month's edition of Coffee and Real Estate. I hope you've managed to work all the way through your coffee. I almost have. The goal is to always leave you with more information on the table than we take up in your time. Hope we've accomplished that. Thanks again for listening. I look forward to sharing time with you next month. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk with you soon.